Hello, beautiful. Get your coffee. It's time for Coffee with Matilda, a journey to self. Today, it's our another episode of Be the CEO of Your Life with
Mhm.
beautiful co-host Nathalie Delaine. How are you, Nathalie?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for asking. How are you today?
Very, I don't know.
Well, yeah, a little bit stressful. So
It's very stressful.
today is election day in the United States, so it's a very charged day with a lot of expectations, I guess.
Exactly. And that's why today we're gonna talk about something very interesting. Something that I haven't thought about. I mean, all my life, it was the kind of the opposite direction.
Hmm. Hmm.
So now we're gonna talk about something that I had to shift my consciousness towards it
Hmm.
a little bit. So I'm gonna give it to you. Let's start it.
Yeah,
How would
let's
you
let's
like
go for it.
to?
So
Yeah.
today we're going to talk about living with no expectations or letting go of no expectations, however you want to word it. But no expectations is tonight's theme.
Mhm.
And I thought I'd start by asking you, Matilda, like when I say, what does living with no expectations look like? Or what do you think that means? How would you answer that?
I don't know because I have a lot of expectation all the time. I have expectation from me. I have expectations from universe
Hmm.
because I'm like universe. I love you so much. You better love me. You better do things good for me.
Hmm.
Um, I guess I have expectation. God, universe, whatever you want to
Hmm.
call it. I have expectation from my body. I have expectation from to function a certain way. To doesn't give up on me now in any way. I'm waiting for at least 50 years. I want 50 years more.
I'm
And
sure you have more.
what else I have expectation from my parents. I have expectation from my
Hmm.
partner. I have expectation of everything. So
Hmm.
the concept of living without expectation is a little bit strange for me, and clearly um, I don't resonate with it.
Hmm.
So I'm excited to learn from you and to see,
Good.
how can I even have that kind of expectation from me?
I love it. And you know what? That's exactly why I wanted to open with a question. And thank you so much for sharing because we're human and every single human on this planet has expectations. So when you say to live without them, it's kind of tricky and hard to understand. So I'm excited to jump into it. So let's just start. What are expectations?
Mm-hmm.
Expectations are a product of our imagination, right? It's when we think something's going to go one way and it turns out a completely different way.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, resentment, disappointment, hurt, sad, those kind of feelings come up towards the person or the situation or whatever it is, right? And then the problem with that is that humans, and I say everyone, they believe that when our expectations are fulfilled, that that's going to bring us happiness. And it can bring us happiness, but it's not something that's like guaranteed,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because an expectation, like we said, is just it's a product of our imagination, right? So I expect tonight to be wonderful. We're gonna have no mistakes. Do we know if that's gonna happen? Nope. But humans get disappointed and resentment, and it's something very heavy that we all live with. And I just wanted to go through some steps on how to start letting go of these expectations so that we can all become a little bit more freer and a little more present in the moment that we always talk about every episode, and just more aware and more present.
But
um
one thing I have question. I mean, how can you
yes.
not have expectation from your life? How can
Hmm.
you not have any expectation
I
from a friend? Like
I love this question, and I
you,
knew it was going to come up. But
your friends, you feel like they're gonna be there for you, yada yada yada, and all of a sudden they're not there. I mean, how can you not expect them not to be there?
So,
There has to be some fairness in the world as well. You can't just say that everything is
yes.
okay. No, not everything,
And
nothing is okay. It's not my
and
world.
I love that you say this because you bring the biggest point. Expectations are separate from standards, right?
Mhm.
And standards or values on how you live your life is separate from expectations.
Oh,
So,
that's very nice.
right? Like you can have standards on how you live your life,
Hmm.
but having an expectation that everything's going to be returned to you in the same way of your standards is not possible when you think about it that way, right? Like we have no idea what's going to come, and like for you to expect the same thing that you give out is it can happen, of course, but it's not something that's should be expected. And that a lot of people asking that, they're like, well, what about me and my goals? And I'm like, perfect example. Having goals doesn't mean you shouldn't have expectations. Everyone should definitely have goals, but having certain standards for the goals, and we're going to get into this more, and the process of getting to the goal and not the results of the goal is a lot of times where the magic happens, where the journey happens, where the growth happens. And we get so stuck on the expectation of things.
Mm.
Sometimes we forget all the other, and it never means not having standards, right? I'm going to be nice to you because that's my standard way of living. Do I expect you to be nice to me? No. Would it be nice? Of course, but I'm not expecting that same thing. But does that mean that I changed my standard? No. I still am a nice person because I want to be. But I just, it's not an expectation that that's how the world is everywhere else because
Mm.
it's not even possible, right? As we
Got it.
see, especially.
Yeah, no, that's a very good example that you gave me. So now I understand. Expectation and standard is a very
Mhm.
different
Or
from.
values, right?
Yeah.
Some people use the word values, like you have very strong values of not telling lies. Like you're very big on integrity, right? And that doesn't mean that you let that go. You're letting go of the expectation that everyone that you around is going to work with integrity, right? It doesn't mean that you can't keep that for yourself. So I love this question because it is tricky, and this is not something that we're taught from early on. In fact, we're taught the opposite, right? Like, from your parents, I expect you to have good grades. I expect you to eat your broccoli. I expect you to go to bed early. Like, it's
I
like
love
bombarded.
eat broccoli part because it's really. If you don't eat your broccoli, you're not gonna watch the cartoon. I'm like,
There you go. And
yes.
that's right. So we're kind of almost conditioned to this. So I'm so happy to talk about it. And one of the biggest reasons having no expectations and living without expectations is that that feeling of disappointment from others goes away.
Mm.
And feeling disappointment is a very heavy thing, especially from your friends and your family, right? Like feeling disappointment from those two groups is really difficult. So when you release and drop those expectations of them,
Mm.
you also release that chance of disappointment. And again, this is very new for everyone, and I get it. And it took me, and still does, there's still days that I'm not good at this, but it took me about a year. Like I struggled with this. This lesson was really hard for me. And some days I'm not, like, I love to plan, especially parties. So how can I not expect that everyone's going to have a good time at the party and that the food's going to taste good and that the wine doesn't run out? And right, I still always have expectations, but the more I practice letting go of that, and the beautiful thing that happens is that so many possibilities can happen. Possibilities that we weren't even aware of because
Yeah.
we were so stuck on that one expectation, right? But imagine if you have none. Imagine what could happen. It's like you open up your world to possibilities and it's
Mm.
freeing. So let's get into some of the how. And this is a big one. So number one, notice that you have expectations, right? And awareness, which is something we've talked a lot about on these podcasts. Becoming aware that you have them is the first step because you don't realize you do this. You don't, I don't, humans don't, we don't realize because again, it's such a conditioned thing, but you wake up in the morning, you expect to catch the bus. You expect for your coffee to be tasting good. You expect your boss to be nice to you. You and it's almost like automatic, and we're just going on our day and we're going. So becoming aware and taking a moment, like, oh, I expect my partner to hug me as soon as I wake up, right? Like little to big things, we're full of them. So becoming aware is the first step, like with many other things, right? Like awareness brings you into that present moment and it makes you realize, oh, wow, no wonder I'm so upset. I expected to have breakfast with my partner, but I forgot that they have work today, right? And like it's such a common thing. So becoming aware, part of the awareness is whenever you hear the word should, right? Like, well, I should get good grades because I studied, right? Anytime the word should comes up, it points to a place that you're holding an expectation. Well, my girlfriend should get me jewelry this year because we've been together for 5 years. Or, no, my boyfriend should be on time because he said he left the house already, right? Like, whenever the word should pops into our head, that is like a good, like, ding, ding, ding. It's like a hidden, not even hidden, but like an expectation that you're holding on to and that you're not aware of.
It's fascinating because Natalie, I'm looking at my life right now. I have a lot of expectation, especially from a partner. That he said this, he shouldn't have said this, he should have acted this way, and it's I'm sure it's tiring for the other person because I sometimes lose my temper, which happens sometimes. And I say things, oh, you haven't done this, you should have done this, you should. And I look at him, and sometimes I feel like he's lost and he brings his explanation, but for me, it's like his explanation is not good enough. How can
Mm.
he even come up with that? And sometimes I get angry at him because I'm like, how can you even come up with this explanation?
Mm.
So it comes down to a very sometimes goes to in a dark road. Maybe if I practice that, I shouldn't have expectation from him to say certain things or to do certain things. I should just let it go and see how he gonna handle it. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's a difficult job.
It's and I mentioned this. This is a very difficult thing to do, and I also want to point something out that you said. You said that it might be tiring for him, but what about for you? Like, how do you feel when you're constantly feeling disappointed by your partner?
Yeah.
Right? Like it's not just tiring for him, it's also tiring to humans. Like
Mhm.
and it's kind of like disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. Like at a certain point, we're just not even gonna feel good. Right. And when we become aware that we're having an expectation, it's like, oh, okay, I didn't communicate that to him. I'm just expecting it. He should do it, right? Like so many things happen when we become aware, and a lot of times the awareness alone kind of like, okay, no, everything is fine. It's just me expecting something that
Mm.
is in my imagination. So awareness is key, like for almost everything. The second way to start dropping expectations is stop wanting to be right.
Mm.
And this hits home for a lot of people, right? You expect your mom to call you first after the last time you had an argument because she's the older one. And I'm right about that. Like she's older than me, so she has to call me first. Like that's it. Right? Like we hold on to wanting to be right so tightly. And even sometimes when we know we're wrong, we still portray like, no, 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 I'm right. And when we hold on to that being right, it doesn't allow us to drop that expectation. It doesn't even allow us to see what the expectation is.
Is
Right?
this
Like it's
ego more of it?
yeah. It's ego protecting you, which ego does, and we're all grateful for our egos.
Mm.
And sometimes we get to say, no, thank you, ego, right? Like it's okay. I don't have to be right about this. Just because my mom is older than me, I can call her first and say I'm sorry. Right? Like
Mm.
it's such a beautiful thing when you realize that you're holding on to being right about something and you let that go. It's like, oh man, it's because I was expecting this or that, and that's why I wanted to be right. And again, it's not an easy thing because who doesn't love being right? I love being right. Yeah, yeah, right. Like
Sure.
humans love to be right, and our ego loves to prove us right. Our ego looks for evidence of things that have happened in the past to say, "Oh, you see? No, you're right because remember last time this happened," and it like attaches to things that happened in the past that could or couldn't even be relevant, but your ego will always try to tell you that you're right. And sometimes we're just not. Sometimes we are not right. And it's okay to let it go. And with that, sometimes it brings up the, oh yeah, I have that expectation. Okay, I should let that go. So it's a toughie, but it's a good one.
Very nice.
Number 3, this is such a beautiful one. Have no expectations of others, right? And again, that this is hard, especially because with your family and your friends, you love them, right? Like it's a relationship. It's give and take and give and take. But it's like kind of what I said before. I'm being nice to the world because I choose to. But should I expect you to be nice to me just because I am? Right? Like I get to be nice to myself. Why do I expect that from other people? Right? Like whenever I release that expectation of other people to be nice, that leaves me to be nice to myself. And with that, I don't get disappointed because I know how to be nice to myself. And then if someone's not nice, right, somebody was mad and they didn't hold the door for me and I was walking into the building and that was really not nice, I let it go because you know what? I say, that poor person's not in a good place right now. I get to be nice to myself. I got the door. I'll hold it for the person behind me.
Yeah.
So not having that expectation of other people frees you to just do whatever you want for yourself. And then you're not relying on like external sources for whatever it is that you're looking for too,
But
which is also tiring.
Natalie, I have a question. What about
Mm-hmm.
the expectation from universe? Like, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like whatever is happening to me is the right moment at the right time in my life. I'm trusting the universe. I'm expecting the universe is
Mm.
doing the right thing at the right time. If I don't have that expectation, then kind of my hope and my trust will go away from with it as well. So how can you describe that then?
So you said the magic word, and the magic word is trust, right? So you can have an expectation of the universe to bring you your dream job, let's say, or you can trust that you're doing all the right things and that the dream job is going to come to you. But when you're expecting it, you're putting parameters. It's going to be $100,000 a year. You get to work from home. You get a company car. You right like that expectation. You're narrowing what it can be. When you're trusting the universe, you have faith, right? Like the trust and the faith is completely separate from the expectation. And this is such a beautiful question because I get this all the time. Like, well, shouldn't I expect that from the universe if that's what I'm praying for? And yes, you can. But isn't it better to just like pray for it and trust and have that faith
Mhm.
that I'm doing this with good intentions and from my heart. So I'm going to trust and I'm going to have faith without that expectation of the job is going to look like this. You have no idea what your job is going to look like. Even if you think it's your dream job, maybe God has another dream job for you. Right? So it's a separate thing for me at least, right? Like trusting and expectations are a little bit separate. So I hope I explained that. Like
Mm. Yeah, I'm really realizing
trusting
right
brings
now.
in that faith.
Faith,
Mm-hmm.
trust, expectation, and then the
Mm-hmm.
other side we have standard. So I kind of was mixing all these three together, whereas I have to
Mm-hmm.
distinguish it
Yes.
very properly so I can understand. And I shouldn't just let go of my standards either. So I have to have my standards and I have to have the
Mm.
trust to
Mm-hmm.
universe or to God
Mm-hmm.
if someone's religious, and sometimes trust to friends and your parents that they're doing the
Mm-hmm.
best job that they can, and um,
Exactly.
not mix it all together. And interesting. And in that way, you can your let go process will be easier. Otherwise, if you're mixing all this together, it doesn't make sense to let go. It's like part of me is that process. How can I let it go? Interesting.
It's a lot of work. It's like you said, you had it all lumped together, and it's kind of like rewiring your brain a little bit,
Mm,
right? And like how you think about things, and that's the beautiful thing about podcasts and what we're doing, and we're trying to help people, even one person, even you, even me.
yeah.
So you said something else too, like trusting your family and friends, and the not having expectation of others is believing that they don't always keep their promise, right? Like friends and family and coworkers, people don't always keep their promises for various reasons, but that doesn't matter, right? And then being aware of that, like if you have no expectations, that promise that they said, you don't hold on to it like, oh, but they promised this, right? Instead of holding on to that energy can be used putting more thoughts into intention into
Mm.
your day, your job, your work, right? Something else, like holding on to those expectations really does get draining.
And I think
Um,
it makes you realize that the only person that you can have the absolute power over is you yourself only,
yes,
and anything else is not
100,
it's
100%.
fascinating. I think while you were saying, while you were explaining, one idea came up to me, and I realized if someone really loves himself or herself, then you know what kind of standards you want in life, and you will
Hmm.
perform based on the standards that you like to have. And what the
Yep.
other person respects that or doesn't respect that is not your problem. And you
No.
will know when to let it go and
Yes.
move on or stay if you feel like it. But I'm sure if you don't love yourself or that self love is not properly injected in you in a way, then you don't know when to go, when to stay. Your standards are up in the air.
Hmm.
Your letting go process is harder as well because you don't know
Hmm.
even when to go, how to
Yeah.
go. But
Yeah.
once
No.
you have that, things are kind of the puzzle is in its place and functions better. Interesting.
That 100%. I 100% agree. And we talk about self-love a lot too, right? And having those standards.
Yeah.
When we love ourselves, we hold on to those standards. When you don't love yourself as much, it's kind of like, oh, I'm with this partner, but they don't really give, right? You hold on to things that aren't really matching what your desires are and what your value is when you don't love yourself. So I agree 100%.
Very.
Um, Number four, and I like this because people are like, well, how do I not have expectations of myself? And with goals, especially, right? Because how do you complete a goal if you don't expect to finish it? So, and I mentioned this briefly, like focus on the process goal and not the result of the goal, right? Like expecting the goal to look like ABC is one thing. Learning, growing, enjoying the journey of the goal is much more valuable,
Mm,
right? And then you gain more even too sometimes. Like if you're stuck on just getting this goal, like everything else, it's going to look and feel and be like this. But then if you kind of just focus on the process of getting there, you might learn something new, you might meet new people, you might travel, you never know what comes up. And people tell me this all the time, like, and it's kind of what we're talking about. Having no expectations doesn't mean that you don't have standards, right?
mm,
Like still have goals. My goal is to be a fit person. My goal is to be a giving person. Um, does it mean that like I expect that of everyone? No. But I do hold myself to that standard, right? And so being in that process is just kind of nicer than getting stuck to the results, and that's what expectations do, and that's why a lot of people feel resentment and hurt and disappointment. Because if it doesn't look exactly like this, then they're like, no, but that's not what I expected. That's not what I saw in my head
mm,
or thought or right. Like we get so stuck on that, and what about all the creative, like all the creativity that's in the not knowing of this?
Mm.
So I tell people that all the time. I'm like, no, of course, set your goals, have goals, and just not being attached to the outcome. It's
No.
super helpful. And not again, not necessarily easy either, especially if you're like a doer, like people
Mm.
who are very organized and like to do. It's a little bit hard for them, but it's possible.
Got it.
Um, Number five, I love this. A great way to let go of expectations is maintaining like a state of curiosity and something that I like to call childlike wonder. Or like if you notice kids, they are amazed and intrigued by everything. Even if they've seen it before, they're just like, oh, that thing again. Oh my God. And they get excited and they're curious and they want to touch it and they want to smell it, right? Like maintaining that sense of curiosity within us, that like childlike excitement and wonder, that helps because you're not stuck on that expectation. You're just more focused on like what's actually happening instead of what you want to happen. And again, that's where the disappointment happens. When what you want it to happen doesn't, then you're like, oh man. But when you let go of that, you're just kind of in this new thing or adventure or at a party, or like it can be as simple as going to a party and you had an expectation that it was going to be boring because you don't know any of the people, but yet your favorite singer of all time happens to be at this party and you get to meet your favorite singer of all time, and you are clearly in amazement because what, this is your favorite singer, you get to meet her. Like, I know that that's a fun example, but it can happen, right? Like that's the thing, like kids see everything as like a toy. Like, how can I fix this? How can I do this? How can I play with this? And we forget that as adults a lot. So having that childlike wonder will definitely help with that. The
Got
next thing, ooh, this is a good one. So number six, allowing other people to manage their expectations of you, right? And we talked about family and friends, so especially family, and I'm gonna go straight to parents. Parents have a lot of expectations of us, their
it.
children, right? I want you to go to school and become a doctor, right? And you've heard that since you were 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years, you've heard that your whole life. Do you even want to become a doctor? No. But your parents have a very strict, they paid for your school, they paid for your medical school, they paid for college. They have this really strong expectation, but it's not your job to manage their expectations. Your life is your life. You let them imagine all they want for you, which is good, right? It's not like a bad thing, but being in charge of your own feelings and path and life, like you can't control what they want you to do and be. And
Mm.
it's hard, right? With expectations, especially with our parents. Sometimes we're like, well, I don't want to let my parents down. I don't want to, I don't want to tell them the truth that I don't want to be a doctor. And then what ends up happening is that you make your parents' expectations yours. And then what happens? The worst thing happens. You're not happy, and you're making someone else happy, but it's not even their life. Like it's your life. Like why wouldn't you do what you want to do? And so finding a way to maintain their expectations to them, and you can do it in a loving, compassionate way, right? I'm not saying to be mean and say you're not the boss of my life, but you can do that in a very nice and loving way. But it's a dangerous thing, and I've seen this happen. Like having those expectations that we heard of from our youth, they slowly become ours, but they're not really ours. And
That's interesting.
it leads to unhappiness, and I want everyone to be happy. This
Maybe
is the
one day
goal.
we can go with this in we can go more in depth in this part because I
The
think
parents,
parents or even friends, I mean culture,
hmm
lots of
society has
society
expectations.
is. I mean, as a woman, there are certain expectation
hmm
people have from you. You're like, I didn't sign up for this. But it comes automatically. Or if you're a man, there's a certain expectation. And if
hmm
you're not partaking in those, or you're not fulfilling those expectations, then society or family or your partner looks at you in a different way. So maybe we can go in depth, because I think in any culture or in any society, in any country, this problem is there.
It is. It's again, it's because it's not something that we were taught from a young age. In fact, we're taught the opposite. We're taught to listen to those expectations, right? Instead of having our own thoughts and feelings and goals or standards, we're like taking on others, and it's hard to say no to your family and your friends
Yeah.
and your parents, especially when you're younger. So yeah, I think that that would be a good idea to talk about this. And it's hard for people to say no, right? And I think that's one of our topics going forward. But saying no is a very valid way of saying, you know, I understand that you want that for me, but that's not for me. And it seems easy talking to you about it, but I know that those conversations are much more difficult when it's with your actual parent. So yeah, thank you. Number 8, and this is a fun one. Acknowledge that you don't know how it's going to turn out, right? Like, and by it meaning anything, like the friendship, the relationship, your boyfriend, your job, your apartment, like you don't know. Like, and we talked about this a bit. We have no control. Like, we don't know how it's going to turn out. You don't know how the party's going to turn out. You don't know how your day is going to turn out. You can set intentions, which we talked about last time, like the morning routine and getting those intentions and getting that energy and that power. But does that still guarantee that you're going to have an amazing day? And no. So, like, acknowledging that we really don't know how things will turn out. It helps us to release that expectation. And then it's like this happens to me a lot when I'm planning things for my family. I have in my head, I literally have a picture, and I'm like, okay, she'll sit there, they'll sit there, we're gonna have a dinner, we're gonna bring the white wine and then the red wine. And like, I literally go through a movie and then I stop myself and I'm like, okay, Nat, that was fun. And we have no idea if that's actually going to happen, so let it go. And again, it takes work because our brain likes to hold on to that. And I think I'm right. To me, having my sister sit there and my family and my brother sit there and my uncle, that's right. But what if I'm not right? So it's a process. It's definitely a process. But when we realize, I don't know, it's so much, like it frees you. And then you can actually be present. Instead of me like planning every moment of the party, I can be a part of the party. I can sit down and have conversations. I can dance. I can drink, and it's a different experience. You're much more present and happy, which is the goal.
Very nice.
Um, so those are 8 steps that I know are not easy, but definitely help you and start you on this road. I it's a long it's a long road. So with my clients, I have a really cool trick that I do, not even trick, like a tip that I do with them. So on post-it notes, like little sticky notes, and I did this for about 6 months. I wrote no expectations on like a bunch of post-it notes, and then all over my house, I would leave the little notes, especially like mirrors. Like when I wake up and brush my teeth, put it on the mirror. Right before I leave my door in my house, I put one right by the door. In the kitchen by the sink, I put one there. And it was such an amazing tool because it was a reminder. Oh yeah, don't have expectations of how my day will turn out. Oh yeah, don't have expectations that I'm gonna have a great hair day. Right? Like, oh yeah, like and they start that little. Your expectations are that little, right? Like super tiny. Like, oh, okay, I'm gonna wear my red dress today to work. Oh, my red dress is dirty. Okay. Right? Like, but having those little notes everywhere all over my house was so beneficial. And I literally think I had them up for 6 months at least. And it slowly gets your brain into this like, okay, you start to understand it more, and then going through those steps and being present, like living in the present moment. And that's kind of always what we get down to at the bottom of it, right? Like if you want to become the CEO of your life, if you want to like take your life in your hands and get the most out of all the juicy moments. Like being present is always the best thing you can do.
Amazing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I like it. You know, all of these expectations and stuff actually takes you away from the now moment. But if you just live with the moment and have the trust that whatever happens, you can handle it the best way that you can, and that's it. And that's life. And everything is beautiful. Every step can be beautiful. And
Yes.
and you're aware of it because of
Mm-hmm.
our previous conversations, and
Yes.
you're taking the right steps. So you cannot control everything. You just
No.
let it go.
Yeah. And again, like talking about it and letting go is so easy. But I promise you, practice. Like just practice. Like with everything in life, like you start practicing these new ways of being, you'll notice, and then you stop. Suddenly you'll stop feeling like, oh, I'm a martyr. Poor me. That didn't work out. That didn't work out. That didn't like right. Like all those things that happen to us and literally are happening to us in our head, they fall away. They fall away, and it's you just become freer. You become present. And you smell the roses more, like
I
like
love
they
it.
say here. Um, so give it a try. Try it with the post-it notes. And I know a lot of people nowadays use their phone for everything. Another great tip that I do is I put reminders on my phone, like randomly, like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock on Monday, and then one on Friday, like no expectations. And a little thing pops up. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Right? Like it takes 1 second, a little reminder to get you back into the present and like let go of whatever it is that you're expecting from the moment, your friends, your partner, your job. Um, and again, it's not standard. It's like you still live by your standards and your values. Like that's a part of you. You keep that. We let go of the expectations.
Awesome. I love it, Natalie. I'm gonna
Yeah.
work on my understanding of what expectations are. Definitely,
Yes.
it helped to define all these three elements: trust, expectation, and what was the other one? Standard.
Faith standards.
Standard. And I'm gonna work on it. And the sticks that you said, the stickers are very good. I'm gonna work
Mm-hmm.
on it, and I
Yeah.
hope the listeners will learn from it as well. I think by you being in a moment, you will have that childish outlook, no, childish excitement of life, that
Mm-hmm.
wonder of life. And it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I think the reason people like to hang out with children is that happiness, that
Mm-hmm.
momentum that they get for anything thing, from the stupidest thing to very big things. And it's important to appreciate those as well. So I'm very happy, Natalie,
Yeah.
that
Good.
we
Good.
had this
Good. Good.
conversation because I think, as you said, resentment is such a um, heavy, heavy emotion that lots of people feel in their life. And if we
And it's.
can minimize it as
Mm-hmm.
possible with letting
Mm-hmm.
go expectation, that can be so
Mm-hmm.
easy. I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't have the fights together, or
Mm-hmm.
some couples would still be together today if they didn't have that expectations.
No, it's so true. I was gonna say the same thing, right? If we can lessen that, those resentments and those hurts that we feel, oh, how free will we be? How like,
Exactly.
I don't know, lighter and just ready for the wonder of the world. So
I'm ready.
I'm ready. I'm trying not to have expectations of the United States election today, but that's one's
Oh
a little
yes,
bit.
I'm nervous.
No, but you see how like it's funny even with that. Like I still have expectations, and so the awareness of it is half the battle. It really is.
Whatever
Yeah.
happens, we're gonna take the right steps for our life.
Yes.
What can we
Yes,
do?
for
We cannot
sure. For
control it
sure.
over more than that. We
No.
did the voting. Now we let the process decide the winner.
Yeah,
I hope
for
it's
sure.
Biden. I
For
wanted
sure.
to mention
I
it.
trust and I have faith that, the right person wins and then we continue building, continue. Thank
Exactly.
you.
Thank you, Natalie, and thank you,
Yeah.
listeners. And we are back with another episode of Being CEO of Your Life. And next week is actually about self-love. Yes, am I?
I believe so. Yes. Let's just say yes. Yeah.
I love that subject.
I do.
So, looking forward to it, Natalie. And ciao, listeners.
Bye.